Hello, world. This is John Pinto, your roving realtor, bon vivant, video blogger, podcaster, home chef. And I am here again with a familiar face. Now I think you all know Ph.D. Matt Tryon, founder of Nutrition IQ. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing great.
Very good. You're always doing great.
I am.
It's a good way to be. It's a good way to be. So last week we did the Libra 2 unboxing and installation. And so I've been living with it for a week. The Libra 2 continuous blood glucose monitor, or in short, professionally, what do you call it?
CGM.
CGM. So just some random thoughts on it. It is incredibly convenient with the patch basically at the rear under my left tricep. You don't have to do too much hunting and pecking with the iPhone to scan the glucose. The glucose readings for me is like a Disney e-ride. It's like a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Now, my wife knows a little bit about measuring A1C and blood glucose more than I do, and she says, don't be surprised. That's the way it works. But I'm thinking with obesity and diabetes running at epidemic levels in the United States and probably the globe. By the way, would that be an accurate statement?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
In fact,
And
diabetes is supposed to grow. I think it's supposed to be, in the next 10 years, it's going to double.
right. And so since all of us, might be predisposed to that epidemic, and especially the older you get, the more difficult it becomes. To me, the metaphor that came in my mind is without having a continuous blood glucose meter wearable, it's like driving with your windshield painted black. You have no visibility on what you're facing, the consequences of your actions. So, could you go through the dashboard with the Libra 2 and a little bit about the readings, what's normal, what's not more normal, spikes, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we need to talk about is sort of how to interpret data and what really to look for. In general, we like to keep the blood glucose fasting levels normally around like 80 to 100 is okay to keep those fasting blood glucose levels around that way. And then when you have a meal, typically they're going to spike anywhere 160 to 175, depending on the constituents of the meal itself, but also, as we know, it's related to what our gut microbiome profile looks like. So there is an impact of how our gut already exists in terms of what's going on inside our gut. It does play a factor in how we're going to respond to these particular meals, and we know that from scientific studies.
Right. So yesterday I was sitting on my couch watching Succession. Okay. Boy, those guys are mean. Have you watched that program?
I have, yeah.
They're all mean. Nobody has a real conversation. They're all so snarky to each other. By the way, for those of you wondering, this is my Vin Scully microphone shirt. And Dodger blue, but Brooklyn Dodger blue, not LA Dodger blue. Just to set the record straight, this is number one, not Boston. Not Boston, get that straight. And number two, I'm more of a Mets fan and a Giants fan. But for sentimental reasons, the Brooklyn Vin Scully with the microphone. So as I was watching Succession last night, next to me I had some dried mission figs, some dried prunes, and some dried mangoes. Mm-hmm. And I went to reach for them, and a hand came out of the Libra 2 app and just smacked me across the face. It gave me a backhand slap. It didn't do that, but it should have done that because after I tested my blood glucose after eating 2 mission figs, 2 dried prunes, and 2 dried mangoes, my blood sugar went the height of like the Empire State Building, and I was quite alarmed. So, could you talk about that dynamic, how alarmed people should be, whether or not we should be eating dried fruit, how long, what time? Please enlighten us.
Yeah, one of the different things, ideally, there's a couple of different profiles, and I'm going to break them down to two different profiles that you'll probably see using a continuous glucose monitor. One is that it really spikes and then it comes down really fast. The other profile is that it'll spike and then it'll kind of gradually come down after a couple of hours. And in general, it's better to kind of have something come down to a gradual level because that keeps our blood glucose levels stabilized more and more. When you spike and then come down fast, you predispose yourself to like a crash where you start going to lower, where it'll crash below normal readings. And this is something I've experienced with mine too.
We talking about sub 70?
Yeah, sub 70. I've gotten lows. During some crashes, I've hit like 65. Now, I don't know that that's like really, because you should around 60, 55,
Mm-hmm.
you need to be feeling something. Like you could be almost comatose at that point if your blood sugar is that low. But the big picture is that it's creating this mechanism whereby we are crashing below a normal level, and that's not necessarily good because we'll start exhibiting some symptoms and not feeling really great, and that's taxing on our pancreas and our muscle tissue when it comes to metabolism. So ideally what we want to see in this profile is to have a blood glucose go up and then kind of come down gradually and not just necessarily spike. So foods, even though you had 2 prunes and mango, and it's funny because I eat dried mango also, and my blood sugar will spike after having dried mango as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to be careful with actually how much I'm eating. Because
Mm-hmm.
it says, I think one of the serving is a 1/4 cup, but it's not, I have to take less than that because my blood sugar is spiked to over 160 before taking the dried mango.
Right. Yeah, and just to set a baseline here, in terms of spiking high, spiking low, what is the ideal high and low spike if you're going to maintain a normal range, and what is the unit of measurement for our audience?
So if you're going to I like to keep my blood sugar below 150. To me, that's what I'm shooting for. That's the peak amount of the spike that I want to keep it at.
Are you willing to go high wire right now and do a scan and tell us what your blood sugar is?
Let's see. Let's do it.
When
I
did
think
you
when I
eat?
just tried it was
When did you eat
106.
lunch? I want people to see how easy this is.
So I ate lunch. Let me see. It's on my other app. I can tell you exactly what I ate lunch at 12:24.
Mm-hmm.
But I did have a piece of salmon at 2:30 as a snack. So today I've had 1,343 calories already.
Mm-hmm.
And I spiked, and I did not, let's see, let's look at, that spike got me to 138.
So the 138 was your spike?
That was my spike.
That ain't bad.
No, it's pretty good. But it came down pretty fast.
To what? Okay, there you go. Here we go.
All right, my current glucose level is 89.
Oh my God! So you recovered very quickly in an hour. In an hour after lunch, after the salmon.
Well, the salmon isn't going to really
Spike it.
spike it a whole lot. But
Yeah.
it came down within about an hour and 45 minutes after the top peak.
Okay,
came
but
down
I do want to
backwards.
bring everybody's attention to how easily Matt pulled out his iPhone, went to the app, and just did a quick scan on the sensor under his left arm and got the reading immediately. And he has a record of daily, hourly readings. What do you scan in a dozen times a day?
Probably maybe more. Yeah, a dozen or more. So I'll do it before I exercise, during my exercise, after I exercise, and I'll do that also with each meal that I have, before, after, 10, 15 minutes after, and then an hour, a couple hours after that
Okay,
too.
so this morning when I woke up, I think my blood glucose was 149 after not eating anything all night. So I had my two cups of coffee with my hemp milk because hemp milk has hardly any carbohydrates. I don't think it has zero. It had zero carbohydrates, zero sugar, and it froths up good. So I knew I wasn't going to have sugar and carbohydrates spiking. And I waited an hour or two before I ate lunch because I wanted to get the blood glucose down, and it got down to closer than 100. Now I've heard you talking about fasting, so would you say a side benefit of having the continuous blood glucose meter is if you see you're higher than you want to be, then you do fast for an extra half hour, hour, 2 hours to get it down before you eat your next meal, or does it work differently?
No, I think fasting is actually a really great way to help control blood sugar and metabolism, actually.
Okay, and usually when people think of fasts, they think of Mahatma Gandhi, for 3 months not eating anything. But when you're talking about fasting, you're talking about fasting for a half hour, an hour, 2 hours, just to get your blood sugar stabilized. Is that accurate?
Yeah, you can wait longer periods, go longer periods of time without eating. Typically, we're going to go. Most people are on 12 hour this 12-hour cycle where they have a 12-hour period where they're eating, and then a 12-hour period where they're not eating between sleep and whatnot. Intermittent fasting is also another way to do that. I mean, controlling your sugar and controlling your metabolism can be helped by intermittent fasting. And some people do it a number of ways. I have experimented looking at 16 hours of not eating in an 8 hour and eating in an 8 hour window. There's also 17-7 where you can have a 7 hour eating window, and then the 18-6, which is very common, with a 6 hour eating window, which could be 11-5 or 12-6, which a lot of people do.
Let me give you another strategy. I don't necessarily go to the gym and work out a lot, but I move around a lot. So another strategy that I have is I kind of package all my activities for after I eat breakfast, lunch, or dinner. So if I have to do kitchen cleanup, run laundry, put out the garbage, what have you, I'll try to batch it all into half-hour increments after I eat so that activity might burn some of the glucose and stabilize it at a lower level. Is that a good strategy?
That's something I think works if you've had like a Thanksgiving type meal, and then
Mm-hmm.
rather than sitting around, I think having activity is helpful with immediately helping with stabilizing those glucose levels, particularly when it comes to how our mitochondria and the metabolism with mitochondria work. But you're absolutely right. If you're going to have a meal like that, having a little bit of activity afterwards is actually going to help stabilize that.
So theoretically, like having a dog can be very healthy if you sync up the dog walks after breakfast, lunch, and dinner, because that's going to be a half hour of you having a moderate stroll. You're probably going to get your heart rate, close to 100 for 20, 30 minutes. Is that a good strategy? And should people buy dogs?
Sure. I think having a dog is a great strategy to controlling your blood glucose levels.
Yeah. Or you could just go out and take a walk.
Yeah.
You can just go out and take. I don't know if the other day on my Aura ring on St. Patrick's Day, I think that might have been the first day that I had it. And on St. Patrick's Day, I do a lot of walking, but I don't think it counts as a healthy activity when your walking is basically bar hopping to one bar on every corner. Would you say that's an accurate statement?
I have no comment on the subject.
Yeah, yeah. So one more thing before we depart from the post Libre 2 post-mortem after I've had it for a week. I don't know if you saw it. I sent you an article. The Affordable Care Act prohibits health providers from charging copays on nutrition counseling. And if I read it correctly, says it has to be part of the covered regimen. Do you know anything about that, or is that accurate?
I got the article that you sent me, and I read through it a little bit. I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into the logistics of that, because they're saying there's certain networks that cover it, and then there's certain states that allow that also. There's California, New Jersey, New York.
Yeah.
Montana. There's a few states that do that, but I want to dive deeper into that because I think how they define, nutritional counseling and what that takes, and I think they also said you have to be, like, for example, pre-diabetic, or you have to have those specific markers that qualify you to have that service
Right.
available to you.
Right. So the Libre 2, just stream of consciousness, for me is kind of like a German shepherd that's been hit on the head with a rolled up newspaper once too many times. I mean, you eat something, or you do something, or you don't do something, and you take the scan and you scan under your arm, which is where my blood glucose monitor is, and you see the results of your decisions on how active you decided to be, how inactive you decided to be, what you decided to drink, what you decided to eat. And you get immediate feedback on it. And I think I saw something in a comparable vein where 86% of the users of the Oura Ring reported a significant increase in their health and their numbers after wearing it. So I think one cannot help but behave better and make better choices when you can intervene real time, on demand, and see your numbers, whether it's blood glucose or oxygenation or sleep or calorie burn. It can't help but have you think twice before you do something, rather than moving forward with no visibility in total obliviousness.
Yeah, I totally agree. In many of the clients that I've worked with, even in the first week, they notice a huge difference because they know that once they start looking at information and data, which is really an objective measure of what's happening in your life, they see things a little bit differently because it's a very different perspective than perhaps the way that they've looked at it before. So when you have data sort of flying in your face telling you exactly kind of what's going on, it gives you guidance and feedback to really sort of help tweak the things in your life to kind of make the biggest difference for your health.
Yeah, well, they say ignorance is bliss, but in this case, ignorance is bliss and possibly fatal.
I don't know if I ever bought into ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, right. Well, it sounds good. I think ignorant people like to think that.
We'll keep them that way.
Yeah. But, I am amazed. I am delighted with my wearable tech.
Have you been able to relate anything that you've gotten from your Oura Ring, like data, your sleep patterns, with what's happening with your glucose monitor at all?
I have a different aspect. Ellen and I are not plant-based, but we're what you call flex pescatarians. You know, we'll eat fish. And I mean, if I got an opportunity to T-bone or something, I will, or a sausage or what have you. But the other day, we had some beef bourguignon, which looked very good. But Ellen remarked, "Is this as heavy as I think it is?" I said, "I just think we're not accustomed to eating meat anymore." It felt harder to digest. It caused less restful sleep. I had a little bit more inflammation in my extremities, especially my feet. There was more tossing and turning. And my numbers on my Oura ring the next morning, my readiness, my sleep, they weren't as high as they had been. Most often, then they're pretty good. So I did see a correlation between what I ate and how I slept.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And I'm sure if I checked the Libra 2, I would have seen a similar type of correlation. Matt, in conclusion, your comments on what you think people need to know, since this is primarily a post-mortem on our unboxing of the Libra 2 continuous blood glucose monitor, and a conversation about my experience using it for the first week. What do you feel that our audience needs to know, needs to do, and how do they contact you if they want to talk to you about their personal situation?
Well, I think keeping track of your data, particularly with a glucose monitor or an Oura ring or even sleep. I mean, there are many apps out there for food, for sleep, for exercise, and we can use any one of them to collect data to kind of help us guide sort of what's ideal for an ideal lifestyle for us. If you have any more questions or have comments or ideas, you can contact me at mtryon@thenutritioniq.com or visit www.thenutritioniq.com.
Very good. Well, thanks a lot. I was looking forward to doing this video because I was so excited about my first week with the Libre 2. And by the way, what other brands are there on the continuous blood glucose monitors that you might bring up?
Abbott is the one that makes the Freestyle Libre 2. Mm-hmm. The other one that's quite prominent out there is Dexcom. And Dexcom is very much, it's very much the same kind of thing. I myself have not used the Dexcom.
Okay.
But I'm trying to get access to that. It's kind of harder to do here.
Okay, very good, very good. So thank you very much for tuning in, and I hope you found this helpful. And we'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.